As South Africa's second largest biome, the grasslands boast a rich biodiversity of flora and fauna, and some of the country's most important water catchment areas. People and their livestock have also been integral to this ecosystem for hundreds of years and rely heavily upon the grasslands for their livelihoods. However, the grasslands are under severe pressure. That's why local communities, together with NGOs and academics, have come together to investigate ways to restore the grasslands. This academic and community research partnership explores the various benefits the grasslands can provide to both people and planet, and the trade-offs that need to be negotiated between all parties.
If you go out into a communal area, you'll see that there's lots of resources there that people make use of locally. So particularly things like forage for cattle and other livestock, timber, fuel wood, but also they're very culturally important as well. But those are the kind of more immediate, tangible uses that people make on a day-to-day basis. But also in those systems, there's a lot of other ecosystem services that other stakeholders think are valuable. So things like, I guess, carbon sequestration, water provision, biodiversity, and many other stakeholders like NGOs, local government, national government will prioritize those. So you immediately see a kind of push-pull between different stakeholders in terms of what they value and what they think is desirable within those systems. And so that trade-off lens helps to represent that kind of push-pull, that antagonism potentially. So a lot of the project is about thinking about what those antagonisms or trade-offs are and how they can potentially be resolved.
Small-scale livestock farming is an important economic and cultural activity in these areas. But unplanned grazing over the years has reduced the productivity of the rangelands. The forage quality is poor, while the spread of invasive alien wattle trees is choking out the grazing lands and reducing available water. This has exacerbated the tension between some of the trade-offs that already exist in the ecosystem. One approach is to re-establish traditional resting and grazing practices. Resting the grassland is beneficial to biodiversity and livestock production in the longer term, as well as for providing forage for other purposes such as thatching roofs. As part of this process, the project engaged with local farmers to help create grazing associations, a governance structure aimed at bringing back the ancestral practice of season-long rest followed by grazing. In most communal areas, cattle are free-ranging. Livestock owners share grazing lands and need to agree on their terms of use. This is achieved through the co-creation of conservation agreements, which require members of the grazing association to rest designated areas of rangelands, typically for 6 months during the growing season. It's also clear that in each community, there's a strong will to make collective resting possible, especially with NGOs offering those cattle owners who join the grazing association's benefits in exchange for their commitment towards resting practices.
If we're using a conservation agreement model, they understand better because we commit ourselves and then they commit themselves as well, that we agree that we're gonna help you with 1, 2, 3, and they must comply on 1, 2, 3. So they comply with the conservation agreement, because when they're resting, there should be no animal that's going into that rested area. And then if they comply on that, we support them with things like workshops, bringing market access to them, and animal health, which is vaccinations. Those are the benefits that they are getting.
Ooh, at 52 now, at a 52.50, where do you go? 15 and a quarter and a half. At 15,300 now, at 15,350. 15,3. Thank you.
One key benefit provided by NGOs is access to mobile livestock auctions. These are periodically organized at communities to help local farmers to find a market to sell their cattle, and are really valued by those who participate.
And we're just running quick to just verify the weight here. 500 kilos. We're down at 16,100. Thank you. We're at 16,100.
Mobile auctions are a highlight for many rural communities in the Eastern Cape. These mobile auctions give them a chance to trade and sell their cattle for competitive prices. It also motivates them to join the grazing associations, where they're encouraged to practice season-long rest followed by grazing.
The benefits are coming to the communities because of the grazing associations, but also we must remember these incentives are not for the whole community. It's for those members of our grazing association, those who agreed to be part of this project. Remember, when you go into the community, it's not the same like when you go into a private landowner, because the private landowner's got all the rights to agree or disagree with his own land. So in the communities differ because it's not owned by individual, it's owned by the whole community. So even when you present it to them, you must be aware, or you must be ready that not all of them, they're gonna buy into this project immediately. So slowly but surely they will understand and join bit by bit. Some of them, they want to see these benefits first. So that's how communities are. So we need to be patient with them.
To test whether traditional resting was improving forage availability, fenced enclosures were used in Mvenyane to compare grass production between grazed and rested areas.
We put 5 by 5 meter closures. We fenced them off as a control to sort of like determine potential biomass growth for undisturbed patches of the rangeland, and we compare that to the outside, which is grazed by livestock, to see the difference in biomass. So we did that for the past 2 years. We were doing quarterly biomass measurements. Whatever measurements we're doing in the rested area, we're also doing in the unrested area. Unfortunately, our data seems to be showing that there's no difference in biomass production between the rested and the unrested area. The other monitoring activity that we're doing for livestock counts shows us that when the area is demarcated for resting, there isn't that much compliance among the community members, because every time we go there, we find livestock in when they're not supposed to be in.
On top of that mountain, up there is a camp there that is, as the grazing co-op selected that place so that for some times when I have difficulties, like during winter, when we are having our grass is dry, then we have some place where, because some people, they put their cattle, you see, by force, or they just, during evening, they put their cattle, then in the morning they're taking them out. See, that is not right. We will try ourselves to convince these guys, because they are few. It's still our duty, because we're trying to improve our livestock and the grass. For instance, our cattle here in this place, they are giving birth to calves maybe in 2 years' time. They're supposed to give birth to every year. If they are fed, they can give every year. See, it's what we need.
Yeah, I mean, our strand of the research has basically said that it's often very difficult for communities to comply with the conservation agreements that have been created. The grazing associations which manage this often find difficulties in communities with different dynamics and how they can make everyone in the community follow the rules about when the area is rested and when it is open to grazing.
Another aspect the project is exploring is the impact of invasive wattle on the grasslands. The alien plant has spread into large sections of the grasslands and has reduced the biome's ability to provide the range of ecosystem services it did previously. This issue is a strong example of the many trade-offs we see in these grassland systems. On the one hand, the wattle negatively affects water and grazing in these communal areas. But on the other, the plant is useful as fuel wood, timber, and may even supplement fodder for livestock. Grass growth among wattle-infested areas is poor. The tree canopy blocks sunlight from reaching the understory. As grasses need sunlight to grow, much of the native grassland is being replaced by the invasive wattle. This has reduced the grazing area for wildlife and livestock. Wattle has also invaded the many hill slopes and seeps that feed the Umzimvubu River, causing many of the natural springs to run dry.
We basically are looking at how much of the water is available if you remove the wattle. So it's the assessment of how much water we can actually improve the flow into the river systems if we take the wattle away. And our results are determined by a special instrument called a large aperture scintillometer, which we place above the canopy of the wattle. And that instrument measures very accurately the evapotranspiration above the canopy. We have determined from the differences between a grassland and a invaded area that the wattles are using about 3 times more water than the native grassland would use. By removing the wattle, you would release and make available nearly 60% more of the production. When the wattles invaded, these springs stopped flowing, and of course, removing the wattle makes this ideally sweet fresh water available to people, to the villages, but it also runs off onto the grassland, and that promotes and encourages really good grass growth around the seeps.
Although the complete removal of wattle is the best-case scenario, it can be an expensive and labor-intensive job. We had to carefully consider how to proceed and what sections should be cleared first.
Here we are having a project where we have 770 individuals that have been employed through CSA that are clearing the wattle. And then after that, we also did research in an experimental site we call our wattle thinning site. So that site is 3 hectares, and then the 4th hectare is actually in the grassland as our control. In that 3 hectares, we have 3 plots. The 3 plots are, firstly, we have a clearing, total clear, where we clear the whole wattle. And then the 2nd plot, we are not clearing the wattle. And then the 3rd plot is the interesting plot because that's where we are actually experimenting, pruning the wattle. In other words, thinning the wattle. So we're not cutting all the trees down, we are cutting some of the trees and leaving some of the trees.
Another aspect of the project is looking at the impact of alternative resting and grazing practices on soil carbon. The grasslands contain the highest concentration of soil carbon in the country, but overgrazing and ploughing has led to erosion and loss of soil fertility and carbon. If we could improve the grass cover and species composition of the grasslands, it's possible we can increase soil carbon while increasing grazing and maintaining biodiversity. The resulting carbon credits could supplement the community's income and incentivize participation.
What I personally worked on was more on the grass production and how that's linked to the soil carbon. And we found that at the proper stocking rates and with this, what we call mabawela, which is kind of a simple rotation of the livestock, that you can bring back the grasses, and when you've got more grass growth that you can see above ground, it also means more root growth, and people can't see that, but the grasses are pulling down the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which we know is a problem for global warming, and storing that below ground. So we've been able to do some modeling using some of the local data that is collected by the communities as a starting point. And then the usefulness of the models is that once you've got a model working, a mathematical model, you can play basically with different rotations, stocking rates, fire regimes, and without having to wait 20 years for a long-term trial or something, without putting people at risk. And so we can use those models to say, look, we know that there's some difficulties maybe in bringing these practices back and getting everyone involved, but if it can happen, this is what's possible. And that sort of sparks the imagination and gives people some hope, I think, that things can improve.
In the nearby Black Diamond community, preserving one side of the village area for resting during the growing season using the Mabuela approach is already paying dividends. They're seeing greater grass production, which should ultimately lead to more soil carbon stored.
There are a lot of types of grass there. Although we are not sure what are them, but you can see that with this reservation, we see a lot of shrubs and grasses coming up there. Cattle, they eat this kind. Sheep, they eat this kind. Horses, they eat this kind. We can see the improvement in their bodies.
The gains are thanks largely to the strong leadership of the local grazing association, which enforces corralling at night and season-long resting, followed by grazing for all the livestock.
We're trying by all means to strategize that everyone should be informed that in this particular time, the grazing land on this site. Okay, every day you're heading them to the grazing land, you push them to this site. After certain hours, you go and have a look of them. Where are they? They not go to that closed site. So we can see the improvement day by day.
The grazing committee will also report anyone who takes their cattle into the rested area to the tribal authority.
In the community meeting headed by the headman, we're trying to give the penalties that if you break this law, you have to get the penalty. Mostly it's a payment. It's a certain amount of payment. If your cattle are grazing on that side instead of this side, how many of them? Maybe it's 50 rand each. So if there are 20, you have to pay that 20 or 50 rands.
Large sections of wattle have been cleared, and it has freed up more grazing area. The old spring that fed the grassland for centuries has been fully restored and now provides the community and their livestock with a source of crystal clear water. The spring also runs off onto the grasslands, promoting further grass growth. This underlines what is possible when communities come together and agree on a collective management strategy for their rangeland. Planned grazing is starting to restore grass biomass, with fatter animals bringing higher prices on auctions.
So the benefits are great. So if we rest and at the end of the growing season we've got high biomass in those areas, then we can be pretty sure that there is more forage available at the end of the dry season for the communities. So that's a big tick for people with livestock. There will potentially be more biomass in terms of carbon sequestration there. There will be more carbon in the soil. Potentially it will be better functioning as a sponge for water absorption as well. So you win for multiple provisioning services for livestock, and you've got a local source for that as well. So really it ticks lots of boxes. It's just about the best way to try and many of the community agree it's a good idea. It's how to get everyone on the same page to say, we all need to try and do this.
We will continue to pursue our mission to restore the iconic grasslands of South Africa and explore strategies to generate buy-in from all. After all, healthy grasslands are fundamental to the survival of all who live there.